Hey, good morning. Chuck here with Apple Drains. We get so many questions about, where does the footer pipe go? When you dig along the exterior or the interior, if it's a crawl space, where does that footer pipe? We call it a footer pipe. It's a French drain, but we call it a footer pipe. I want to show you guys a recent pour. They just poured this yesterday, not our construction site, and they will have problems here. But I was driving by and I just said, let's take a look. Take a look at what you can see and understand what a footer really is.
Okay, this is a typical pour of a footer. What they've done here is they've dug a trench that is 16 inches wide by 8 inches deep. Then a concrete truck comes and it pours the footer. It just flows all through the footer system, just like a little creek. That concrete just flows through. They help it with a shovel, and it flows. This is a footer. Everything sits on the footer. It is the most important part of the construction of your house. Notice that it's solid concrete, 16 inches wide by 8 inches deep. Next, you notice that there's rebar that comes up out of the footer. That is so they can set the block on the footer itself. That will be the foundation wall. The rebar comes up through the hollow sections of the block. Now this is where it gets interesting. Number one, notice that there is no footer tile here, and they will have problems. And the reason why is that there's going to be one course of block, and they're going to pour the floor inside that block. You understand? They're going to pour the floor inside the block. They're going to come back with another concrete truck, and they're just going to pour concrete, and it'll flood all the way to the exterior walls, and it becomes solid concrete. That is your floor. This is typical construction anywhere in the world, whether it be in Florida or in Arkansas or in Singapore. It doesn't matter. This is how you build a footer. And a lot of questions, how deep do we dig? Well, you dig down to the footer. And it's nice if you can be right beside it or on top. So again, you've got a footer. This one's 16 inches wide by 8 inches deep. And they're going to set the block on the footer. What they do is they pour a thin layer of mortar and set that block. And then it becomes level. They'll level each block. Notice how rough the finish is of that footer. This is where water penetrates under the floor in any home or basement. Because there's such a rough finish, and yes, mortar stops water, but there's such tiny little holes that water can get through. And you notice that there is no footer tile. This problem exists in most every general contractor's construction. It happens every day. And if you look at the grade of the yard, you'll see that everything slopes down into this area. You see that? This is about an acre of land, and all that water is just going to pour up against that footer and foundation wall. Now this might be 2 courses deep. In other words, they may lay 2 blocks all the way around. But then they're going to pour a concrete floor inside that block. And because it's so close to grade, water will penetrate that. And if they do a hardwood floor, it's probably going to buckle. If they do a tile floor, it's going to pop off and you'll hear it. It'll be hollow. So many questions about, how deep is the footer? This is not the best way to install. This is a great footer, and holy cow, they did a great job. Again, this is not our construction site, but look at the problem that will be there in the future. So if you're going to build your own home, or you're going to be the general contractor of all of the subcontractors that come in, when you pour that footer, make sure that you get a footer tile and a place for that water to go. That's the most important thing. Yes, you can seal the wall with liquid rubber and all kinds of membranes, all that stuff, but you really need a place for the water to go, and that's what the French drain does, which is a footer tile. We call it a footer pipe because it sits at the footer level. Make sure that you install that. And you've seen in many of our videos where we've come out and had to correct the problem. So if you're going to dig down to the footer, remember that the footer holds up the foundation wall. In this case, it's going to be block. After the block, it could be wood frame, or maybe they're going to continue block. But what we're talking about is the footer and the foundation itself. If you're going to correct the problem, we've already got this done, house is built, you're going to correct the problem, you need to dig down to the footer and install the footer pipe. That gives water a place to go. We're not going to be talking about discharge. Of course, you've got to get that water to get away from there. And you notice I like to use sump pumps. They work great. But if you have a good gravity to send that water away, of course, you can put it to let it be gravity. This yard, this lot, there's no gravity here at all. They're going to end up with a sump pump. And they will end up with a problem probably in 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. But they will have a problem. That water is going to come through that first course of block where it sits on the footer. Remember, you lay a bed of mortar, you lay the block, and you continue to build. But that very first course of block is where the problem exists.
So hopefully that gives you guys some idea of what an actual footer is. A lot of people don't understand the footer and the wall. And when you dig down to the footer, it's usually pretty deep. This one's right on the top of the ground. It's only going to be 8 or 10 inches deep. But that's normal here in Florida and in many places around the country and around the world. That footer, when they pour a slab concrete floor, is not very deep. And you notice there was no footer tile in there. This home will have problems. So just kind of keep that in mind. When you build something, or if you're going to put the new footer pipe in, this is an example of something that they did not put the footer tile around the perimeter. Hey, this is Chuck with Apple Drains, reminding you that if you believe you can do something, I guarantee you can do it. Have a great day.